r/askreddit. What's the scariest story that you know is 100% true? My mom was driving and a guy ran out in the road, so she stopped so she couldn't hit him. It was nighttime, so it was pretty dark out, and 3 other men emerged from the forest around, while trying to use the door handles of her car to get in. She locked them, luckily, and gassed it to the nearest town. Remember to always lock your car after you start it, because if it wasn't unlocked, who knows what would have happened to her. Nutty Putty Cave in Utah was sealed up in 2009 after John Jones was trapped upside down in a small crevice while spelunking. When rescue teams finally arrived, he had been upside down for so long that his legs were drained of blood. The only possible way to have gotten him out was to break his legs, which would have sent him into fatal shock. He died after being trapped for 28 hours, his body still in the cave. When I was a baby, my dad played on a softball team. Typical social team, out for beers and pizza after with the guys, family event type thing. My parents were good friends with 2 of the other couples. Both of them had young kids as well. On this occasion, the other 2 couples had left their kids at one of their houses, with the babysitter they were splitting. They invited my parents back to the house to have some more beers that night, but I was being fussy and my mom nixed the idea, though they would have 100% normally have gone back to hang out. Well, it turned out my fussiness on that day saved our lives. When the other parents got back to the house, they walked in on a home invasion. 2 men had broken in, tied up the kids and the babysitter, and her boyfriend, and were waiting for the parents. Took the parents hostage as well, and made the dads drive with them to banks/a grocery store where one dad was manager, and clear out accounts/a safe. They then came back to the house and slaughtered both families, the babysitter, and her boyfriend, kids included. They caught the 2 guys later on. My dad attended the trials, and said it was the first time he had ever thought of supporting the death penalty. It still gives me chills to know how close we came to getting killed that day too. My dad and some friends got drunk and went for a drive on some back roads and were going as fast as a truck would go as teenagers. My dad was slightly less drunk than the others and eventually demanded they let him get out. They pulled over and he and one of the other girls got out. Well, less than a mile up from the road where they got out is an extremely sharp turn, which they missed and hit a tree going pretty close to triple digits miles per hour. 2 of them died on impact, and the only reason the third survived is because they crashed in front of a house that had 2 doctors lived in. The survivor was paralyzed and lost his leg and part of his arm, and was in the hospital for 8 months before dying. This was in the 60s, so medical care wasn't what it is today. When I first got my permit, my dad took me to that same corner to explain the importance of safe driving. It gave me goosebumps about how close he was being in that truck. He said that the dad of the driver got what remained of the truck to be hung up in the center of town for months, after to be a warning to all. I once heard a property was abandoned and it was all over school that it was haunted. My friends and I decided to drive up to take a look at it one night. It sat on a few dozen acres. There was no fence and no signs prohibiting access, and all we had to do was take a dirt road for a mile to get a hill that overlooked the whole property. Turns out it was abandoned but still owned, and had a caretaker. The caretaker literally drove trucks with the light off right up to us, and then turned them on and tried to ram us. We were able to avoid him, but then he followed us at 60 miles an hour off his property back onto the road, then into and past a residential neighborhood, trying to ram us off the road the whole way. My car and his truck narrowly avoided hidden houses, parked cars, and narrowly missed driving straight into a church before he stopped and turned around. I know I was on his property, but there were no signs and no barriers, and we were just on the edge of it. That he chased us away past his property and tried to kill us multiple times, and probably felt justified because we were trespassing, still gives me the chills. People are capable of anything if they feel justified in their violence. In my town in the early 90s, there was a notorious killer that had all of BC, Canada, on watch. My wife's mother, years and years before I knew them, had been home alone while her husband was in England doing tree surgeon work. She was in her laundry room when a man walked up from her basement, completely scaring her. She freaked out and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" He told them he was friends with their husband and was just coming to see if he was here. Apparently, he told him that he could just walk in, which she knew was bullshit. She was smart enough to tell him that he was just at the store and would be back any minute. He said he would wait outside for him. As soon as he left, she called the police, but he was long gone by the time they got there. 2 weeks later, the killer was caught. His mugshot put on TV, and it was the guy in her house. During World War II, an American airplane crashed near the Japanese island of Chichijima. Sorry if I said that wrong. There were 9 servicemen on board. 1 was rescued by an American submarine. The other 8 were taken in by the Japanese. Don't want to go into all the details, but through some time and events, the Japanese ended up eating those servicemen. But that's not the weird part. The 1 serviceman who was rescued, that was George H.W. Bush, a girl I went to high school with. Her parents and her little brother left for the weekend to go on some trip, but she had softball practice and couldn't go. She was home alone sleeping in her bed in a completely dark room. She's startled awake by the loud sound of her bedroom window breaking. She watches as a dark figure slowly crawls into her room through the window. The figure's eyes aren't adjusted to the dark, but it turned towards her because it sees something. This mysterious man inches slowly towards her, trying to see what this lump is. He gets his face almost right up to hers before he realizes it's a person in bed. His eyes widen, and he slowly backs away and crawls out back the window. The people that bought my childhood home were murdered. The man that killed then snuck in and out of the house for a week. He would often slip into the house and be there for hours. He would hide in places that I knew. I knew them because as a kid, those were the best spots to hide for hide and seek. My favorite hiding spots were killer's hiding spots.